Hey, it's Hawken with TopDon. Today we're going to do an introduction on the new RLink Lite. The RLink Lite is the newest diagnostic device from TopDon that is going to be used with OEM diagnostic and programming software as a J2534 style solution. So, without any further ado, let's go ahead and get into the information on the product. So here's the physical hardware so you can see it real clearly. Sometimes we like to do videos where we show you it with my hands and everything, but the pictures here are really quite a bit better than what I'm going to get on the camera. So let's take a look at what we've got. The hardware footprint has a screen on the front. Currently, the screen is simply used for looking at your firmware version and the Android operating system of this tool itself. Now, the firmware updating process is performed through the screen. We'll make a separate video on that so that you see that process. It'll be a very short video, but we'll walk you through that process just so you're aware. So basically, the screen right now is just for checking firmware and looking at the operating system of the Android tablet that's built into this, if you will. In the future, in some markets, you will be able to place remote orders through the hardware. That is not the case right now. You'll want to check with your local TopDon distributor or your local TopDon office in your specific area, geographic region, in order to find out when and if remote is going to be deployed in your region. Now, the rest of the hardware, we have a 16-pin here on the left, and the 16-pin connector is for connecting to the vehicle diagnostic port. You will receive a cable, which we'll show you in the contents in the next page here, that will connect from this port to the vehicle OBD or onboard diagnosis port. On the right, we have a couple of different ports. We have an Ethernet port, which is used for updating the physical hardware firmware. Basically, you plug in AC power, which is over on the right here, and you plug in Ethernet directly to your router, and then the tool can be updated, the firmware can be updated via this route. There is also a USB port, which is used for connecting the RLink Lite to your preferred PC for programming. So now let's look at the contents. In our contents here, we have a couple of different things. We've got the actual tool itself. We have a nice padded carrying case for keeping your tool safe and protected when you're not using it. We have an AC to DC power adapter with the given region plug required in your area. We have a nice gold-plated terminals, 1.5 meter USB cable, which is used for programming and diagnosis with the RLink Lite. And then we have a 5 meter network cable, which is for Ethernet, plugging into your router and things of that nature. And then also a 2 meter OBD2 diagnostic and programming cable. So this will go from the RLink Lite to the vehicle onboard diagnosis port. So that concludes our table of contents, package contents. So let's talk about why you might want to get an RLink Lite and what it will do for you. I'm going to move my bubble here to the other corner so you can see everything clearly. So today's vehicles are more complicated than they've ever been. We're talking about more vehicle networks, gateway technologies, secure, you name it, right? Everything is much more advanced and much more complicated. The other thing that we need to remember is that when a new model year is released, sometimes vehicle manufacturers will put proprietary technology in here that will not have any solutions in the aftermarket to service, diagnose, or otherwise interact with those systems effectively when they come right out of the gate. Now, many customers will bring their vehicles to the dealer in the first couple of years for warranty work and things of that nature, but sometimes customers don't want to go to the dealer. If they don't, or if you happen to be a body shop or a repair shop who does ADAS calibrations or something along those lines, you may get some of these brand new model year vehicles. When that happens, you will find that sometimes your aftermarket scan tools may not have all of the software developed yet for this given platform vehicle. And of course, this is because whenever an aftermarket tool has to catch up, it takes time. They have to engineer the software to talk to the vehicle and perform all the functions, and that does take time. So if we get into that situation where we need that solution, In many situations, we'll be able to purchase a short-term subscription to the vehicle manufacturer's OEM software and then use the RLink Lite in conjunction with that software in order to accomplish the things we need to during the course of service or diagnosis or potentially ADAS calibrations. There are more communication networks on modern vehicles than there have ever been before, and some of these particular communication networks can be quite complex to diagnose. Some vehicle manufacturer software contains interactive diagnosis functions. Many of those functions may not ever reach an aftermarket scan tool simply because they are proprietary and the way that they work is specific to an individual vehicle manufacturer. On the other hand, if you have the RLink Lite and you purchase a short-term subscription to the OEM or vehicle manufacturer software, you may be able to execute some of these tests, which in turn will allow you to diagnose what's wrong with the vehicle more easily. So let's go to our next slide here. You also want to remember that a lot of vehicle manufacturers have implemented secure gateway technology. Now, the ones that most people are most familiar with would be Stellantis, Nissan, Renault, and Infiniti have also implemented these gateways. Mitsubishi has these on some of their vehicles as well. Hyundai Kia is in the process of developing this technology and implementing it in the aftermarket. Ford has some gateways on some of their vehicles. And so what you'll find is sometimes the aftermarket tools are not able to bypass these or unlock them. And this is often due to there are server authentication processes that take place. Again, there's engineering that has to be performed in order to make the software talk to the database to unlock that gateway. And so, of course, the aftermarket is oftentimes just a little bit behind in order to be able to talk to these networks and unlock these gateways. So, having the RLink Lite and again a short-term subscription to the OEM software will allow you to proceed and unlock those gateways and perform that diagnosis and or service function. Now, another thing you want to keep in mind is some vehicle manufacturers build their diagnostic testing information into the factory software platform. This is very common on European vehicle brands. Basically, there will be a walkthrough or holding your hand or providing you with instructions on what to test and how to test it. There are also service functions that require that factory software, calibrating certain components and things of that nature, where the measurements may only be provided within the diagnostic platform. Volkswagen Audi is one that's well known for this. BMW can have this as part of their system as well. And of course, then with the RLink Lite, used in conjunction with ODIS for Volkswagen Audi, Lamborghini, and Bentley, or with BMW ISTA, you will be able to perform those test plans effectively in many situations. So again, the RLink Lite becomes the hardware solution necessary. You'll also find that having access to the OEM software in conjunction using with your RLink Lite will really save you a lot of time on many of the newer and more complex vehicles. So something to keep in mind as you go through any testing and diagnosis and or service on really brand new model year vehicles. Now, the other thing you will notice with that is many vehicle manufacturers will also build in some service information content. So service information content such as wiring diagrams, component locations may be built into the vehicle manufacturer diagnostic platform. And so having it connected with the RLink Lite may allow you to interactively solve problems on the car quite a bit faster without having to go look up additional information. So here are some of the specific protocols for communication that are supported by the RLink Lite. Now, some of these are generic in nature. Some of these are more specific to individual vehicle manufacturers. However, it's a pretty broad and very comprehensive overall list of protocols that it covers. Now, remember, it's not going to cover every vehicle from the beginning of time. However, it is very comprehensive on the whole as far as what it is capable of doing. Here are some examples of the software that it is compatible with. So you'll see we have most of the major vehicle manufacturer softwares that are J2534 compliant. It has been fully tested and verified as functional. It is also compatible with some of the vehicle manufacturer regular diagnosis. Some manufacturers provide parallel J2534 software. Some manufacturers provide just one software solution, and in the vast majority of cases, the RLink Lite works perfectly with that software. Now, just a few notes we want to go over. Eventually, we're going to get ourselves to a on-car demonstration and walk you through one example of a vehicle manufacturer's software so you can see what it looks like in action. But we're going to go over just a couple of key details before we go there. There is no OEM software included with the RLink Lite. This is a separate purchase that must be made with each vehicle manufacturer. So if you're using GM, you must purchase a subscription with GM's in order to gain access to their software and download the software and install it on a computer. Now, you cannot install all vehicle manufacturer softwares on the same hard drive or same laptop partition. They must be isolated and separate from each other in order to ensure proper functionality. Now, as far as which manufacturers may be able to work with each other on the same partition, it's variable. However, keep in mind, there is no comprehensive or definitive list available from TOPDON or from any vehicle manufacturer because they're not going to tell you if Ford can live with Volkswagen or not. All we can tell you for sure is in order to ensure maximum functionality, vehicle manufacturer software must live separately, either on separate laptops or separate partitions. So you can't go sticking Ford with Volkswagen or Ford with Jaguar Land Rover. It has to be either on a separate laptop or a separate hard drive partition. So keep this in mind. Now, each vehicle manufacturer software also has specific vehicle or specific requirements with regard to both hardware and software. So there are additional or ancillary softwares that must be installed before installing the OEM software on a computer. Things such as Java, C++, and older .NET framework versions. These don't come standard on Windows operating systems, therefore you will frequently have to install them yourself. A few other things you want to keep in mind. TOPDON Diagnostic Support Hotline can only help with the physical hardware of the RLink Lite and the drivers for the RLink Lite. We cannot provide support on OEM software, diagnosing a fault on a car, or anything with relation to the actual Windows operating system or the computer itself. If you need support on something like that, we would encourage you to reach out to your local TOPDON distributor and find out if there is a provider who makes and sets up laptops for these purposes, as typically these providers will also offer support on those laptops. As far as the OEM software goes, if you ensure that your laptop is compliant with the system requirements, then you can typically reach out to the vehicle manufacturer for support on their software. But again, this is a crucial thing you want to keep in mind when you are reaching out for support. Now, a few other things you want to keep in mind with regards to the drivers on the RLink Lite, and we'll make a separate video on this with the RLink Lite showing driver installation as well as updating the firmware. That'll be our technical video. When we're installing drivers and the OEM software, as well as running the OEM software, we need to make sure our antivirus and firewall are disabled in the Windows operating system, and no additional antivirus or firewall system is added or enabled on the computer. This can create issues with driver installation and or transmission of files from the vehicle manufacturer when you are working on specifically diagnosis or programming. Now, this is also why we do not want to use our programming laptops for other general purposes. We don't want to go surfing the internet with a laptop that has the firewall and antivirus disabled. However, we do need those things disabled using the OEM software for programming. So just keep that in mind. We already mentioned the additional softwares that may need to be installed. When you're going to go get the drivers, this is where you want to go. You want to go to topdon.com, and you do have to put in the www. You want to access the page for the RLink Lite. Then you want to click on the download section, and then you'll find the driver link there. And that will be the updated version. They keep that live. Now, we'll also show you in our technical video on the RLink for basic stuff how to do the driver update, how to do the firmware update, and also how to select the device in at least one vehicle manufacturer software. All right. Now, where you get the OEM software. This is going to be different depending on the specific region you live in. In the US and Canada, OEMOneStop.com is an easy place to go that will link you to all the vehicle manufacturer software solutions. In other global regions, you will need to do some research and find out where specifically this information is housed. Each vehicle manufacturer may have a web address that is specifically for a given region. So Volkswagen Audi has .com in the US, but in Germany it may be .de for Deutschland, right? So again, it's going to vary depending on your region, and many vehicle manufacturers have separate websites for separate regions. So you'll need to do the research on where you get the software for your specific region. Here's a couple of different specific tips we're going to go over briefly here just before we go into the live car demonstration. So just basic stuff before we go any further. Make sure your laptop meets the requirements for the specific OEM you plan to do programming with. Make sure you've separated that specific vehicle manufacturer software from the other manufacturer software. And a simple uninstall is typically not going to do that. So if we've already installed Volkswagen on a given computer, a simple uninstalling of ODIS is not likely going to wipe out everything that could interfere with another manufacturer. You would most likely have to reformat that partition and reinstall Windows after erasing the partition in order to ensure that it is a full clean install. So of course, that's not something you really want to have to do. Again, this is why you either want separate laptops or a pre-partitioned laptop setup. Now, we got to make sure we install those ancillary softwares like C++, Java, and of course, .NET Framework, some of the older versions. Then we want to make sure we install the RLink Lite drivers, and we want to do this before we install the OEM software, and we want to install just the drivers we need for that given brand. So if we're going to do Ford, we only want to install the Ford drivers. We don't want to install Ford and Volkswagen and everything else. Then we're going to install the OEM software after we have purchased the subscription. Then we're going to run the OEM software and select the RLink Lite as the vehicle communication interface. Each vehicle manufacturer's software has this in a different menu, so we're not going to try to show you this on every single brand. Once we've done that and we've established that the RLink Lite is communicating with both the OEM software as well as the vehicle, now we can proceed with our programming or diagnosis function. So now we're going to go ahead and proceed into the on-car demonstration portion of our video. And so we'll see you over at the car.
Hey, Hakan back here with the on-car demo portion of the RLink Lite video. So in this portion of the video, we're going to show you hooking up to a Volkswagen. And before we get started, we're going to do what we should always do if we're going to do any coding or programming or even diagnosis. We're going to hook up a stable power supply. We're going to use the TOPDON T120A and set the voltage to a stable level. And then we can proceed on with our diagnosis / any coding or programming. So we're going to first show you the setup on the T120A, and then we will move over to the screen of ODIS, which is the factory diagnosis software, and show you how we set up the RLink Lite in choosing the VCI in the diagnostic software. All right, so let's go ahead and show you the T120A. All right, so we've got our T120A plugged into the wall, powered up. Now, when we plug it into the wall, we want to make sure we use at least a 20 amp circuit or breaker. So now we're going to go in here, we're going to turn it on, we're going to go to work mode, we're going to hit OK, we're going to go to supply mode. You can see our live voltage reading here is 12.5, and then we need to choose if it's the current state of the vehicle battery is above 3 volts or below 3 volts. If it's below 3 volts, we need to select this. If it's at 3 volts or higher, then we select the upper one. Now, the other thing we want to make sure we do is check vehicle service information from the vehicle manufacturer and verify that there is no specification provided specifically for voltages during a programming event. So once we've done that, now we can go ahead and hit OK. We're going to set it to, typically I set it about 200 millivolts higher than what I want it to be. That way, if there's any surge in amperage, we won't dip below our desired threshold. So if I want 13.5, I'm going to set it to 13.7. Then I'm going to set my amperage limit at about 100. Newer vehicles, BMW F and G chassis, we're probably going to want to go all the way up to 120, but most modern vehicles, 100 is fine. So we're going to hit OK, and it's going to start up. And you can see, you'll watch our voltage climb, and now we are at the voltage target. It tells us here how much current is being pushed into the battery to keep the voltage steady. And so it's not very much right now, only about 10 amps. So now we can go ahead and proceed on hooking up ODIS with the RLink Lite, and we'll walk you through that on the screen. So let's go ahead and move over there.
All right, so now we're going to show you the on-car portion of using ODIS with the RLink Lite. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to skip around a little bit here, but I'm going to scroll through and show you where you will select the device and connect to it. So let's go ahead here and we'll get the video started. And if we go here to the Extras menu, so you see where my mouse is hovering over here on the Extras menu, right here. The Diagnostic Interface button is what you're going to click, and this is going to allow you to select whichever communication interface you're using, which in this case is going to be the RLink Lite. So you'll see I've only got one selected here. We're going to click on it, and then we're going to, after we click on it, we're going to use Selected VCI. And once we've done that, we should see in the top right corner a little key icon if it's recognizing the key position in the vehicle. Our voltage, which is telling us, of course, we do have the T120A connected to the vehicle, so we have good connection there, good voltage supply. And then we also have the little computer picture here, which tells us that we do have connection to the servers for ODIS in order to proceed with everything. Then you'll also see a message over here where it says it's identifying the VIN. So the diagnostic interface is going to talk to the car and pull the VIN number from the vehicle. I'm just going to speed this through a little bit to get us to the part where we look at everything. And then we're going to look here. We see use guided fault finding and hit starting diagnosis is where it'll take us in. And then we have to do the group login, which is the two-factor authentication. I didn't show that screen, but that is something you do have to perform now when logging into ODIS in order to be able to have access and get it to work. So let's go ahead and continue on here. So we're going to use you'll get a screen like this that'll pop up that will show you the vehicle identification. You want to make sure it matches the vehicle you're connected to, both the VIN as well as year, make, and model information. Then we're going to go and we're going to click on the networking diagram, which you can see down in the bottom left here. And this will populate a network diagram. Now, the way that ODIS does this is it talks to the gateway and asks the gateway information about the vehicle, and then it will populate all of the modules that are communicating that should be equipped and any that have faults. So it's going to go through and generate basically a bunch of information here, and you'll get a little status bar on the bottom left here that says when it's done. And then it's also going to do some verification steps, just looking at various equipment to make sure that it knows which versions the vehicle is equipped with of various components like the radio and such. So you see here, traversing of radio systems, it's verifying which radio it has, so on and so forth. So again, we're going to speed through this a little bit just to get you through so you can see everything. Once it finishes parsing all of the data, it'll bring you to a screen like this, and it's going to give you what they refer to as diagnostic objects, at which point we can now run integrated test plans for any of the suspected faults that are in the vehicle currently. So if we speed through and we click on one of these, we can click on Perform Test down in the bottom left after we've selected one, and it's going to take us into the related test plan for that given issue. So we believe there's an issue with the headlight. It's going to take us through the test plan. You can see there's a lot of different useful information here, like component locations, connector views, functional descriptions, and potentially some testing instructions. So if we go and look and click on some of these different things like component location, connector view, function description, and function test guide, we can actually get some additional information from the program. So as we look here, here's the assignment of the two connectors on the J519, which is the body control module, which is responsible for powering the headlights on this vehicle. As we go through the test plan, we can see again here, so there's a component location for where it is found on the vehicle. See what else we got. Function description. So here's a description of the BCM. Gives us a bunch of information about various control unit functions, the bus networks that it uses to manipulate those functions, all of that kind of stuff. Here we have information about load management, which is really useful information. So we know if the vehicle is going to shut down certain functions based on battery voltage. So we'll speed you through this. Function test guide. You can see here they give you just some basics on testing for short to ground, short to power, etc., that kind of stuff. But this is all the information that people are frequently looking for when performing diagnosis on these cars, and it's not going to be found in the service manual typically. So having access to this with the factory scan tool platform can really speed up your ability to find the problem on a vehicle. So as you can see here, it verifies faults, then it asks you questions and interviews you, so to speak, to determine what the nature of the faults are. We'll kind of speed through this here so you can see. Asks you to do some wiring tests, inspect connectors, things of that nature. So pretty straightforward stuff, right? But it's still helpful to have it hold your hand through the testing and let you know, hey, here's the next step you need to do. So once we're done doing that, we're going to click on the Special Functions tab, which is up here, and we're going to show you what coding a control module looks like with the factory software. So in most cases, you're going to go into the Special Functions menu, and you will go down here, and you have a couple options you can do. You can do adapt software or code online control module. In this particular situation, we're just going to show you what adapting the software looks like. So you won't have the same options on every vehicle with Volkswagen Audi for ODIS, but these menus under the software version management, you will typically have the majority of these options on most vehicles. So when we go into the software management menu, we'll have some options here. So we're just going to pick by diagnostic address. And basically what we're doing here is we're saying which specific module we would like to find out if the software is fully updated based on just normal checks. Each module in Volkswagen Audi land has an address word. If we scroll back on our video real quick here and take you to the topology menu, you will see those numbers are here on the topology list. So if we want to know which module has which particular address number, we just go to the topology menu. We can right click on it to find out what the module is called, or we can go to our control module list instead of the network diagram and see the name of the module. And the address word will always be these little numbers right next to it. So in this particular case, if we were going to do, we'll scroll back through our video here. And if we get to do our coding, so here is where it asks us to input the address word. So we're going to put in address word 01, which is for the engine control module, and hit accept. Now, the software is going to check the online database with Volkswagen and verify if the software is current. Now, sometimes there will be technical service bulletins or reflash type bulletins that will give you a specific action code. And when we were initially in the software version management menu, we could use a different function and type in that code to activate a software update instead of just a general software check like we did here. So it's going to speed through, and we'll speed this up for you. So it's checking the software version, checking the software version. It takes a little bit of time to talk to the database over the internet. Now remember, it's always a good idea to plug your computer directly into Ethernet to your router directly. All right, it's still transmitting data. Whoops. Okay, so it'll come through when it's done. It'll either say it's going to update it, or it's going to come back and say the version is current. So the version is current, no update required. Okay, so now take you back to the main page here and show you a couple other things. So here we've got, when we right click on a module, which you'll see me do here in just a moment, we have access to guided functions. Guided functions are used for a large variety of different tasks. So using our RLink Lite and the factory software here, we can do many different guided functions. Some of these are tied to service procedures where we may have to make adjustments or enter in values. And sometimes they're going to be diagnostic functions. They can have a lot of different utility. But essentially, if we click on guided functions, we'll get a little list. So here you can see some different options. If we just installed a new ECM, we may need to turn on the cruise control module or cruise control function in the ECM, adapting the throttle body. So if we replace the throttle body, we may need to adapt it. A lot of these functions you're going to be able to do with your TOPDON Phoenix Plus or TOPDON Phoenix Max or any of your Pro Series tools. But occasionally there may be functions that the aftermarket tool doesn't have. And in those cases, you could go in with ODIS and your RLink Lite, and then you'll be able to perform those functions with the factory software. So we can see replacing control module function is generally one that you do need ODIS in order to perform. So this would be an example. Value blocks is where you can look at basically live data on the scan tool. Now, ODIS doesn't offer graphing. So again, your TOPDON Pro Series scan tool is going to be a whole lot better on graphing and diagnosis of that nature than trying to use ODIS. Generate readiness code is really nice if you're trying to validate if you fixed a vehicle problem with regards to the engine drivability. Generating the readiness code in a bay, just running, can be really nice to do with the scan tool, as opposed to in many situations on most vehicle manufacturers, you would have to drive it through a specific protocol in order to satisfy those criteria. So we'll take you through here just a little bit more, show you the value blocks readout. So this will be different on every vehicle. The numbers are going to be different and the different labels will be different, but pretty straightforward to go through. You can pick some different data blocks, whatever you want to look at live. We'll just put in voltage, engine speed, and engine RPM. So a specified engine speed and engine RPM. So now we have to hit the start update button after we do this. So we'll hit the button, start update. We have to click manually, and then it's going to keep sampling each of these data PIDs. And if you watch, we start the car, and now we can watch everything change. So just looking at live values and things of that nature. So just a few different functions. Want to show you that you can perform with ODIS if you have an RLink Lite and you purchase a subscription to ODIS for either Audi or Volkswagen or Bentley or Lamborghini. So a lot of different vehicle manufacturers covered between those three that you can perform a wide variety of tests and functions using the factory software in conjunction with your RLink Lite. So hope you enjoyed our demo. Just a brief demo to show you that it connects and works well with ODIS. If you got questions, if you got comments, you got ideas for new videos you'd like us to do, we'd always appreciate that. Please like, subscribe, and share our videos. We always appreciate that from you. So I'm Hawken, and thanks again for taking the time to watch our RLink Lite introduction video.